Thank you, Tafadzwa. Welcome to ZTN once again as we're discussing everything to do with green energy. Let's start with the success of your 5 megawatt plant in Wange. When we came through last year, but it was still work in progress, but last year you managed to connect to the grid and you're now supplying to the national grid 5 megawatts. Just tell us about the success story there.
Taku, it's been an experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything. The last time that you visited the plant in Wange, indeed we were finalizing in terms of construction, but we've since started feeding into the national grid from last year on the 3rd of October. So it's been a couple of months. Interesting. At every stage there are lessons to be learned. I'm glad that I come from a young organization, a learning organization. So the idea is that we keep learning, but also the focus now is on scaling up within Zimbabwe and across Africa.
All right, just tell us about how you managed to make this feasible. When you look at some other independent power producers, they're really struggling to come up with funding models that are actually working. I remember 2018, there was a debate in Parliament, 2019, where legislators were saying, look, let's revoke these licenses because the people we gave licenses are just holding onto these licenses for speculative reasons. But here you are. How did you manage to fund your project and how much did it cost you?
So the project cost us circa $7.3 million to deploy the first phase 5 megawatt. The mix of the 7.3 million involved equity, but the bulk of it was a loan from a local institution. We partnered with Old Mutual Life Assurance Company. They are now an equity holder within Solgas Private Limited. But look, the whole idea of going local, 100% local, was primarily because we struggled to raise money from foreign investors because there were certain conditions that we were supposed to meet that we failed to meet. I guess it forms the core of why you see a number of IPPs, independent power producers, that is, struggling to raise the necessary capital. Zimbabwe is a special place. It's a place where you have to be a serious long-term investor, and you have to be very, very patient. So most of these foreign investors, they look at the free flow of funds in and out. With the advent of the auction, it has actually helped because now foreign investors are now beginning to repatriate their monies in terms of dividends and loans that had been stuck in Zim for some time. But capital is very, very shy. We have to keep on working on the auction system to make sure that we have as much forex as possible. And part of making sure that we've got enough forex in the country is to look at our import bill and try and reduce on what it is that we're importing. Key of which is electricity. We're importing a lot of electricity. The last time that I checked, we're importing about 400 megawatts per day, mostly from Mozambique and South Africa. But as you know, South Africa is also facing challenges of their own. So mostly now, it's Mozambique. But if we are able to deploy 5, 10 megawatts and we keep scaling up, it means that we're also reducing the forex demand for the country. So if we can replicate this in all the different sectors of the economy, eventually Zimbabwe will become a good place to invest in because you will have a lot of free foreign funds for the purposes of repatriating the money. For me, the way that I look at it, it's really a confidence issue. I've got the benefit of being Zimbabwean, so I understand how the Zimbabwean system works. But for foreigners, they're still a bit jittery. But look, Zimbabwe is open for business. Eventually, they'll catch up somewhere along the way.
Okay, just to come in, interesting, you mentioned the issue of how it's important to grow in lips taking those leaps and bounds eventually. But right now we're facing power cuts, serious power cuts, which are threatening, the amazing progress that's been taking place in agriculture, as well as even the mining targets to, generate 12 billion US dollars by 2023. We are importing, like you rightfully said. How critical is it for financial institutions? Because when you talk to other IPPs, they say we tend to rely more on foreign direct investment, like you were speaking about there, because your financial institutions locally are shy in terms of investing. What's the cause for this shyness from local banks and financial institutions?
So it's primarily because most of the IPPs, almost every IPP, it's a greenfield. So banks, they want to invest where there's a bit of cash flow, where there's a history in terms of the company trading. But this is a unique industry in the sense that the IPPs have only been around for a couple of years, and most of them are still actually starting out. But in our case, as Solgas, we're now a brownfield because we're now operational. So banks and other institutional investors, they're now beginning to show a lot of appetite because we've proven the concept. So the idea that's there really is IPPs should focus on starting small, even a 1 megawatt, even half a megawatt, just to prove the concept, so that people understand that the technology is working. Once you've got a scenario whereby there's confidence with the technology that we're using, whether it's solar, whether it's mini hydro, the funds will start to come in. It's literally a relationship that has to be nurtured. The banks also, I guess because of experience, investing in greenfields, it's really, really tricky. The risk profile is too high for them. But Taku, we are sitting in a unique scenario whereby you've got local pension funds and institutional investors sitting on the other side. They're saying that they want to put their monies into renewable energy. But at the end of the day, the IPP holders are greenfields. They're struggling to access this money that's on the other side. So I think there's scope for banks to come in between and sort of like broker the deals for them, bridge the gap, if I may say, to actually make sure that these transactions work. With Solgas, the advantage that we now have is that we've partnered with a financial institution that's a giant in the marketplace. As you know, Old Mutual has been in business for more than 170 years now. Speaking of which, in the Zimbabwean sense, if you are to look at the partnership between Solgas Energy and OMLAC, it gives credibility to even youngsters like us, because the fact that we've partnered with Old Mutual, it means that we are doing something right, and people now have got confidence, or rather investors now have got confidence in us, because by extension our partner has imparted the necessary knowledge and structures and systems within our organization in order for us to be able to attract even bigger monies. So in a small way, even the foreign investors, they're also talking to us, because you go through a rigorous due diligence process in order for you to be able to access monies from pension funds. So this is we're sitting in a unique space, which we also intend to take advantage of and make sure also that we train and capacitate even other local IPPs that are interested in deploying their projects, as long as they are realistic and as long as they want to start small and build capacity as they go.
Okay, you've spoken about the funding on the startup side, where you want to take this thing off the ground. But now let's talk about the other cash flow, which is the power purchasing agreements with the relevant stakeholders, be it ZERA and the ministry. How is that coming along? And could you just give us a bit of education on how these power cuts are also affecting players like you because of downtime, and how you potentially lose revenue because of these power cuts?
So your solar power plant does not work in isolation. It works, especially if it's grid tied. It actually works with the national grid itself, The moment that we've got a power cut, it means that we were not able to feed into the grid itself. I'll explain a bit further. So in order for our inverters to actually kick off and start feeding into the national grid, they have to be energized from the grid itself. After being energized from the grid, then they switch on, and then they start feeding back into the national grid. So grid availability issues are a big issue for concern. But again, it's a matter of working with the utility company, ZETDC in our case, and ZERA is the regulator, the ministry, as the responsible government body, to actually try and make sure that we've got grid availability for the bulk of the time. Because the moment that we are not able to feed, it means that we're going to fail to meet our production targets. And when we fail to meet our production targets, in turn, we're going to fail to honor the loan obligations that we have, and it affects the confidence of our investors to say, if the grid is unavailable for the bulk of the time, why should we invest in an asset that's not going to sweat enough to realize its maximum potential? So it's one area to look at critically. From experience now, we actually going to invest a lot of our time, energy, and money in assessing the quality of the grid at whatever point that we intend to be feeding, because that is critical. In the first 3 months of operations, particularly in the first month, we were actually producing at around 50% of our production capacity, because the grid was unavailable for the bulk of the time. With the onset of the rain season, you've got a lot of downtime because of power cuts as poles are falling on the other side of the line that we didn't construct. There are issues to do with way lift clearances. But as a private player, we've also taken it upon ourselves to actually help the utility company by availing resources, be it in form of human resources and money itself, to replace poles, because if we leave it like that, it means that we're not able to meet our production targets.
But have you engaged the authorities regards these challenges?
We have, and the authorities are very much cooperative. There's a capacity issue within the utility company, but like I said, it's a matter of presenting the problem together with the solution and working together. So we're working very, very closely with ZETDC, particularly the Western region. They've been very good in terms of trying to respond, even though there are capacity issues, genuine capacity issues. Sometimes they fail to respond to faults on time because they don't have transport, and we always step in as a private player to make sure that we bridge that gap. I believe it's a challenge that we will eventually get over. It's good that we've got a good rapport with ZETDC.
Interesting. I think we'll have to engage them after this and hear what they have to say. Let's take it outside Zimbabwe for a bit and go back to COP26. A couple of months ago, the heads of states across the world gathered in Glasgow to discuss these issues of transitioning from fossil fuels to starting to use renewable energy. And one of the things that came out from that meeting, when President Emmerson Mnangagwa came back to Zimbabwe, he highlighted that there was an agreement that the first world countries would start funding the transition for African countries and other countries that, like your Latin Americans, South Americans, will also be part of this fund, which will be coming from the first world countries, so that we expedite the process of transition. Given that, a couple of days ago, we saw the UN SDG program being approved. We will see about 45 million being availed to Zimbabwe, 10 million from UN, and the Zimbabwean government, alongside other partners, including Old Mutual, are going to be funding that 35 million. How critical are such collaborations in terms of transitioning from the current system of using energy sources like coal to solar energy, wind, and even hydro?
Look, it's very, very critical for all the stakeholders to come on board and actually contribute. The different stakeholders that are involved, the government, private players, fund managers, pension funds, we all need to work together. At COP26, $100 billion every year for the next 5 years for third world countries that you're talking about. Africa, where we stand now, is that there's a lot of money, a lot of funds for renewable energy, but the quality of the projects across the African continent are quite poor. We need to work as Africans to actually also capacitate ourselves amongst the different African countries and start, training and putting money towards training and capacity building for African developers to actually be able to benefit from those funds. Last week I was in Rwanda. They've got a unique situation whereby they've got a lot of money, but the money they're failing to deploy it because there are not enough projects for them to actually deploy the money. This is the story when it comes to funds that are available from COP26. Now getting into COP27 in November this year. So we need to work on capacity and work fast, because this is a technology industry. Things change and move fast. This is where players like ourselves come in. Having done a project of this nature in Zimbabwe, it gives us an advantage because conditions in Zim, they change quite fast, and we've had to be on our toes most of the time. So we've got some serious experience when it comes to dealing with chasing a moving target, which certain African jurisdictions don't have because the environments are different. So I think it's also an opportunity for Zimbabwean companies to actually go out there and look at other African countries and help develop quality projects in those countries, so that we're able to access the funds that are floating all over in terms of renewable energy. A bit of statistics, Taku. In terms of electricity penetration, Africa, we are at around 24%. The rest of the third world countries, it's around 40%. There's a gap. We're even lagging behind amongst third world countries. But I'm looking at Africa as a continent, and I think this is also very, very important. What I'm about to say, we need to start looking at Africa as a country, because if you look at the GDP of Africa, it's 2.6 trillion. You look at the GDP of the United States of America, it's 21 trillion. China, 15 trillion. France, $3 trillion. The economy of France is bigger than the African economy. But the reason why we don't penetrate that much in terms of renewable energy projects and other industries as Africans is because we're looking at it from a micro point of view. I'm looking at it from a Zimbabwean point of view. But Taku, business is about scale. You need to be able to scale up. The moment that I go out there and I'm trying to raise $100 million, fair and fine, $100 million will probably do 100 megawatts in Zimbabwe. But $100 million for certain funders and certain players, it's too small, because the same amount of energy and time that they're going to invest in actually assessing that 100 million is the same as $1 billion. But you can't deploy 1,000 megawatts in Zimbabwe for solar, for example, because our grid is too small. Currently, we stand at about 2.2 gigawatts, right? Meaning that solar we can do plus or minus 500 megawatts. But here we are. You've got a funder who's saying, okay, the minimum that I'm going to look at is 1,000 megawatts. And naturally, it then means the Western countries, Eastern countries, they're able to tap into those funds because of scale. Because in China you can deploy 1,000 megawatts, but in Zimbabwe you can deploy 1,000 megawatts. If you want to deploy 1,000 megawatts, then you have to look at Africa, and then you look at 10 different African countries, come up with a portfolio, and then that's how you actually build capacity and scale up as a business.
Seeing the gap, are you as Solgas interested in actually spearheading some of these projects outside Zim, because you speak so passionately about it and you're seeing the opportunities? I know you're well traveled, having been in South Africa, these are the places where solar is also starting to peak and gain momentum. What's your plan? Are you eyeing opportunities outside Zim?
So the plan that we have, Taku, is that we're going to be working with youths and women in different African nations. Why youths and women? Because the youth, they are the custodians of tomorrow. We need to train Africans to actually be able to participate and tap into these funds. Because the sad situation and sad reality is that you've got a lot of European, American, and Chinese companies that are coming to the African continent and building these projects. But what it means, Taku, is that the moment that they've built the projects, the funds are going to flow back, out of Africa, be it in form of dividends or loan repayments. But if we are able to actually participate in this energy revolution as Africans at inception, it means that we're also going to be able to retain a lot of the money on the African continent and reinvest it in other sectors, be it manufacturing, mining. The key thing to also mention is, energy is the starting point of any meaningful investment. If any investor, before any investor is to come to any African jurisdiction or even Africa itself, they're going to look and say, okay, I'm going to need power to actually, to actually start manufacturing or to start mining. Where am I going to get the power from? And as long as we don't build capacity in terms of generating power from renewable energy sources, it means that we're not going to be able to manufacture as much as we want to. What it means is that we're also going to be exporting our raw materials without value adding them. And we've lost an opportunity to actually create jobs for our people, the majority of which are living under a dollar, a US dollar, $1 per day. So we need to actually invest in energy, and energy will have the ripple effect of actually making sure that there's capacity in mining, there's capacity in manufacturing, capacity in agriculture, which we are talking about. And we start making our own finished products.
Okay, let's talk about numbers, since you're throwing numbers there. One might be seated at home watching this in the office or at, in an aeroplane going somewhere, and they're watching this interview and they're saying, okay, you're talking something that makes sense, this is something they want to invest in. From your project, how long do you think it will take to recoup the funds that were invested through your partnership with your various stakeholders?
So it will take about 7 years to get the money back that was invested. But like I did say, renewable energy, and just like most infrastructure projects, they are long-term type of investments. And part of what we also need to do as Africans is just to utilize the monies that we have in sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, monies that are generated from the taxpayer. As you are working and as I'm working, we're contributing towards pensions. And it's wise for us to actually then start tapping into those pension funds to actually utilize them and invest them with solar. It's with being an IPP, it's a 25-year license typically. So for the next 25 years, you're going to be generating power. There's a lot of sustainability in terms of jobs created, other downstream opportunities that are also created, an economy around all these power plants. And as long as we've built enough power plants, then we're going to have capacity to manufacture. Then we're going to have capacity to mine some more. So it goes on and on.
The policies have been put in place. The renewable energy policy was put in place 2 years ago, and government has been on record saying they will do their best to ensure that IPPs like you in solar will get to import their equipment duty-free. But an interesting element we're also starting to pick up, you're saying that technology changes fast. We've seen a high rise in terms of pricing of solar panels. Is this in any way something that can affect the pace at which Zimbabwe can transition, or it's something that can be manageable?
It's something that can be managed, especially at country level. We really can't do anything about panels, the prices of panels going up and down as a country. But what we can do is encourage investors to actually invest in the renewable energy sector, which the government has done through the National Renewable Energy Policy. Over and above that, look, we are a testimony of the existence of this particular policy, because we imported all of our equipment duty-free VAT free, and for the next 5 years, whilst you're producing, we're not going to be paying income tax. It steps up gradually from year 6 to 11, I think. Then from then on, it becomes a normal circa 25% income tax. So the government has made tremendous progress in terms of inviting players to actually invest in the renewable energy sector. I think where there's still room to improve is on the allocation of foreign currency. Of course, now we are now on the priority list, but I believe there's a direct relationship between the amount of money that we get allocated and how fast we move in this industry. The industry is moving quite fast across the world. Now there's hydrogen, there's the battery technology is also improving. So solar is slowly becoming more and more reliable. With the price drop in terms of battery technology, eventually I think we'll be able to feed with solar 24/7, and it can become a base load. So we're slowly getting there. A lot of patience has to be exercised.
Yeah, a lot of patience, but there is progress. We've been speaking to the Zimbabwe Energy Regulatory Authority CEO Mazambani has been on record saying, whilst there has been a lot of delays because of funding constraints, there is quite commendable, progress that's been seen in the sector. As we come to the end of this conversation, what are your words to someone wishing to venture into renewable energy and also an IPP holder of a license who's struggling to get funding?
So my words would be, look, we are happy to engage and happy to help in terms of trying to bring this dream to life. Part of what we are looking at as Solgas is also how to help as quickly as possible to move the projects from being greenfields to brownfields, so that we're able to access money a lot much faster. The train is moving. Everyone is welcome to join in. The sector is growing, like you said. Capacity is also growing. Slowly but surely, we'll actually get to be a net exporter of electricity within the region. The most critical thing that I would say, not just to IPPs, but to fellow young business people, is that it's all about putting your skin in the game. It's all about digging deep and be as ready as you can be for the investment. Capital is very shy. I'll repeat this. And in order for you to convince someone to put $1 million in your project, it means that you've put in as much as you can into your projects as well. So we're happy to engage. But now that we've got the proof of concept, it's now more about scaling up. Having more and more megawatts on the national grid, and those megawatts don't necessarily have to come from Solgas only. We can partner with other IPPs, to bridge some of these gaps, to move them away from the hurdles, to reduce their risk profile, and they're able to leverage on what we've done, and we deploy this technology in Zimbabwe, then across Africa as well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mundicha, for joining us here on the show where we say everything that's green is gold. That's all we have for you today, and thank you for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your day.